We're okay. We're all live now, Chair.
Thank you very much. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Scrutiny Commission for Charnwood Borough Council. There are a number of things that I would like to remind people of before they start the items on their agenda. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Council's website following the meeting. Under the openness of local government bodies regulations, people may film or record this meeting, and this is outside the Council's control. However, people wishing to film or record the meeting should do so in a way that does not disrupt the business of the meeting. Also, so that the meeting is not disturbed, could I ask everyone present to please turn your mobile phones or switch them off or switch them to silent, and ensure that the environment is distraction free. And I'm just going to do that. Right. Thank you. And can I remind everyone that this is a public meeting, so please conduct yourself in the appropriate manner. Thank you. As this is a virtual meeting, it will run slightly different. Members will need to introduce themselves and state their name and confirm that they can hear and see the proceedings. This is important for the purposes of the recording attendance and transparency of the meeting. I will do this by undertaking the alphabetical roll call. Members will use the raise hand feature in the participants section of Zoom software if they wish to speak, and will be allowed to do so in a queue system. Councillor Bolton.
Councillor Jill Bolton, I confirm that I can both see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Brooks.
Hello, yeah, Councillor Matthew Brooks. I can confirm I can both see and hear the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Harsh-Nicolau.
I confirm that I can see and hear. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. It's Councillor Hamilton. I can confirm I can both see and hear proceedings.
Councillor Parton.
I can hear and see you, Chair.
Jolly good. Councillor Ranson.
Good evening, Chair. I can hear and see you both. Okay,
and
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ransom, and I can see and hear the proceedings also. Right, we also have officers present at the moment and members of the Cabinet. So, Councillor Jonathan Morgan, please.
Good evening, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Jolly good. Tom Barclay, Deputy Leader.
Good evening, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Thank you. Rob Mitchell, Chief Executive.
Good evening. Yes, I can see and hear. Thank you.
Okay. Justin Henry, Strategic Director of Commercial Developments.
Thank you, Chair. I can both see and hear you.
Thank you. Matt Goodyev, Information Development Manager.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can both hear and see proceedings.
Thank you. Karen Widdowson, Democratic Services Manager.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Watson, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you, Chair. I can hear and see.
Thank you very much. I believe we've only had one apology tonight, and that is from Councillor Grimley. Councillor Parton is subbing for Councillor Grimley. Thank you very much, Councillor Parton. Item 2, minutes of previous meeting from the 14th of September. Can I ask each member, and it will be verbally, whether you give consent that you have received and noted the minutes. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I have both received and noted the minutes.
Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, received and noted. Thank you.
Councillor Harsh-Mitchell.
Received and noted, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I have received and noted the minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Parton.
Chair, I've received and noted them. Thank you.
Councillor Ranson.
Thank you, Chair. I've received and noted. Thank you.
and I have received and noted them as well. So the outcome is that the minutes are correct. Thank you. Right, item 3 is disclosures of pecuniary and personal interest. Are there any, Karen?
Madam Chair, there is none to be declared. I can't see any blue hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4, declaration of the party whip. There is none to my knowledge. Item 6 is questions under scrutiny committee procedure 11.16, but disappointingly, there are no questions submitted. Item 6 is a review of scrutiny function arising from the COVID-19 pandemic report. That's page 14. Can I ask Karen Widdowson to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the report before the Commission tonight concerns whether to continue with the suspension of the current cycle of directorate-based scrutiny committees and scrutiny panel work. At the meeting of the Scrutiny Commission in June, it was decided to suspend the directorate-based committees until the end of November. And so it is now timely that the committee considers the position. I would also like to draw attention to a refresher scrutiny session that I ran last Thursday evening for a number of the Scrutiny Committee members. And at that session, there was a consensus to continue with the suspension of the directorate-based committees in light of the continued uncertainty and impact on council resources arising from the pandemic. It also would be suitable for reviewing that at a later date, and it is for this evening's meeting to decide when they would like to review if indeed they wish to. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Has any of the councillors got any questions at this point, or can I just, I should just jump in here actually, and the discussion was around whether we should postpone or suspend the meetings further after the November. Because that is the time that it was agreed to suspend them in the first place. And it's also been noted that the 3 directorates have been altered from an email that we've had today, and that will, I suppose, alter the membership of the committees. So it is thought that the suspension should carry on, but I would like to know thoughts from the other members of this committee, please. Councillor Hamilton.
Yes, I believe, I wasn't part of the discussion, but I believe there was a discussion that it was logical to carry on as we are for the time being. I also believe that that was subject to a qualification that members of other scrutiny committees could actually feed into this committee. So it'd be useful to elaborate on that. But what I would propose is that if we perhaps review this at a later stage in next year, after perhaps the next quarter or so. So that would move it to around about March or something like that, and then we'll be in a clearer understanding because of the kind of changes in committee structures and so on and so forth. Seems timely, but could someone elaborate on the mechanism by which other members and other committees can feed into this?
Karen Widdowson.
Thank you. Yes. So following the discussion at the scrutiny refresher session that we had, an email was sent round to all of the scrutiny committee members, the directorate-based committees, to say that what we will do in future, when the items are selected for pre-scrutiny, when the agenda gets published for Scrutiny Commission, we will also email each of the directorate-based committee members to say these items have been selected. If you would like to pass on any views, observations to the chair and vice chair of the Scrutiny Commission, and indeed any other members on the Scrutiny Commission, so that the views of members are not lost in the directorate-based committees. And we thought that was a very good mechanism to give members a voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. All I wanted to say was that I support what Councillor Hamilton has said and think it makes sense to actually reconsider this in March or April next year. Thank you.
I think the date would be March the 8th as next year. Councillor Parton.
We've actually got some large items the council have to consider coming towards us. For example, the consultation on landlord licensing of HMOs finishes on October the 23rd. That is, in the history of Charnwood, an absolutely enormous undertaking, something that will be welcomed vastly by the community if it's passed by Cabinet. So, given that normally that would pass through the scrutiny cycle, could I make a suggestion that, say, a week or 10 days or a fortnight before the Scrutiny Commission meet, that the Democratic Services send out an email saying these are the items that will be considered by the Scrutiny Commission. As scrutiny is not meeting in its current form, please submit your comments to that to the chair, to Sally and Karen, so that people feel that they've actually had a chance to feed into something. I mean, people may have wanted to speak about investment strategy, commercial development, but I would have thought that the headline grabber will be landlord licensing, especially within the local press.
Councillor Parton, that sort of dominated the meeting, that we were very concerned that a lot of councillors would lose their voice if those directorate scrutiny committee meetings weren't meeting. So that is part and parcel of what we're suggesting will happen. And Friday, you were sent an email, all the councillors of the members of the committee meeting was sent an email that was explaining this. And so anything that appears on the work programme that you feel should be discussed at Scrutiny Commission, if you could feed it to the chair of your committee, or either myself or Councillor Hamilton, or indeed the Democratic officers, please do so. Yeah, so that is what we are planning to do. Karen Whitson.
Thank you, Chair. On item 11 on the agenda, we have got the Scrutiny Commission work programme, and we have the list of key decisions coming forward. And I just double checked, and on page 84, the private sector housing licensing scheme is listed in there. So it's at that point in the meeting later on where you can decide to actually add that as a pre-decision scrutiny item, and therefore that will trigger the mechanism of inviting comments from other committee members. So I've noted that, so I'll highlight that later in the meeting. Thank you.
Right, I have no other people raised hands and asking questions on that. So I'm going to try to find this piece of paper and move on. So item 7 is the audit.
Sorry,
committee.
Chair.
Sorry.
Chair, can I just get a formal...
No, I've got to say, yeah, okay.
So I need a formal resolution,
yes, yeah,
to the effect.
Sorry about that. So we're proposing to suspend the 3 directorate scrutiny committees until the 8th of March. So Councillor Bolton.
I agree with the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Yep, I agree with that as well.
Councillor Harsh-Nicolau.
I agree with the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the motion.
Councillor Parton.
Agreed, Chair.
Councillor Ransom.
I agree, Chair.
And I also agree it. You see, that wasn't on my script, so I've gone off script now. So, Karen.
Just for clarity, so then the 8th of March meeting will have the same report come back asking it when you would like to restart the committees. It's that review point again. It's not at that point, it's a review point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, item 7 is the Audit Committee update. There is no update from the Commission at all, but there's acknowledgement of a question, and that will be forwarded on, and I'll take it up with the lead member and the chair of the Scrutiny Budget Panel. And the question comes from the independent chair of the Audit Committee. So I'd just like to acknowledge that question, and it will be forwarded to the appropriate person to deal with it. Thank you very much. So item now is cabinet items for pre-decision scrutiny. The following items have been identified for pre-discussion scrutiny from the cabinet agenda for the 15th of October.
Sorry, item 8 you need to go to pre-decision scrutiny.
Oh, I thought I'd gone past that, you see. I've gone on to 9. Pre-discussion scrutiny of any specific financial matters to be considered by the Cabinet. There are none. So item 9, Cabinet agenda for pre-discussion scrutiny, the following items. So item 9A is changes to procurement services, page 16. Councillor Barclay and then Justin Henry, would you like to go through the part? So first of all, Councillor Barclay.
Yep. The procurement procedure we have at Charnwood at the moment is being run by 2 officers. One is a senior procurement manager who is there until January 21. He's on a short-term contract. With the volume of stuff that's going to be coming through and the increased level of procurement right across the board, the suggestion is that we enter into a service level agreement with Nottingham City Council to undertake our procurement, who they have about 20 officers procuring there. We will have a named contact at Nottingham City Council. It gives us a lot wider scope, it gives us a lot more resilience, and it also gives us a lot more experience. The post that we have at Charnwood will be retained, and they will be our contact with Nottingham City Council. This is an arrangement which has worked well at Ashfield Council, and they managed to undertake schemes which save them in the region of £700,000 a year. There is also there's great recognition of the Green agenda and 2 local procurement locally within Charnwood, and if at all possible that will take place. So the paper is very straightforward. The list of benefits are clearly outlined on there. The process and service level agreement is there for councillors to read. But I'll now hand over to the strategic director for his comments on this.
Thank you, Councillor Barclay.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Barclay. Not a lot to add, I'm pleased to say. Councillor Barclay's given you a fairly long rundown. In terms of my experience with this particular agreement, you may or may not be aware, but I was instrumental in creating this along with my counterpart at Nottingham City several years ago for Ashfield. So this was one that was built between ourselves and several other districts have been picked up along the way. The levels of service and the professional attitude towards modern procurement, in my experience with this service, has been tremendous. And from that perspective, the service is more than willing at Nottingham City to welcome Charnwood into that and allow us to reap the benefit of that. Certainly, probably the one point to make about this is that this is a collaborative approach, so it will not absolve officers within Charnwood of any control or any responsibility in terms of making sure that we're managing our procurement timetable and the items that need to be delivered. However, in terms of the professionalism and navigating the gray, shall we say, and also in terms of delivering on the environmental agenda and the localism agenda, it has proved quite successful, and it will prove quite successful.
Thank you very much. I find it quite interesting to read, and I've got several questions from this. Could I just ask what an enhanced procurement service would be in addition to what we've got now?
Thank you, Chair. I'll go ahead and take that question, Councillor Barclay. In terms of the delivery of that, the enhanced element of the service is really about the width and breadth of experience that the team will actually bring to projects that we have on the horizon, strategic projects like strategic asset realignment. Certainly in terms of reprocuring very large service provision contracts, which are not long in the future for us at this particular element. There is a great deal of experience doing that at Nottingham City, and I must say currently, and this is certainly no criticism of the officers that we have delivering procurement on a daily basis for ourselves, but we certainly at the moment lack a lot of the experience required to deliver those in the most professional and commercial fashion that they could be. Whereas the service has demonstrated in the past for not only Ashfield but other authorities quite a much more commercial view with regards to procurement rather than just, let's say, box ticking and rule following, being more proactive with solutions.
Thank you. And just one other, the paragraph for policy justification. You've got legal services will also assist in the preparation of the memorandum of understanding if this is the most expedient approach to formalising interim arrangements. I've got no idea what that means. Could you explain, please?
Certainly, Chair, not a problem. A memorandum of understanding is effectively, whilst not officially legally binding, it's an official position signed by both parties to say, this is the element that we're asking you for. And there's a corresponding list of obligations and outputs that come with that. So it's something to guide the working relationship. And they were only really intended to act as a stopgap between deciding to work together and actually having the contract in place, not a replacement for the contract or the service level agreement in this particular instance. So that we can comply with requirements of audit and good governance, we would expect there to be a memorandum of understanding if we were to start engagement with them before the service level agreement was actually in place, so that we had some guiding principles that we had both agreed, but that certainly wouldn't delay the agreement of the service level agreement. Now, I must say the service level agreement that's appended to the report has been drafted with good governance and lots of experience behind it. Certainly because whilst I was at the previous authority, I was on the other side helping to draft for making sure that it's balanced and reasonable on both parties. So certainly from that perspective, we've crossed a lot of the due diligence that we ordinarily have to do, but certainly we want to satisfy ourselves from a charter perspective as well.
Okay. I would like to say that's crystal clear, but it is a little bit clearer. Thank you very much, Justin. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions, Justin. Do you want me to ask them both or ask one and get your answer?
Ask them both, Councillor Bolton, if you like.
Okay. My first question was, have we actually explored any other procurement options apart from the one that is in this paper? And my second question is, the sort of residual savings that you've put in there, £15,000, we obviously wouldn't be doing this if we felt that that's all we were going to save. So I'm just wondering if you have any idea, any estimate of what this could well save Charnwood Borough Council on an annual basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. To your first question, in terms of have we explored others, certainly I carried out an extensive review of partnership working arrangements several years ago, and more laterally a more localized review, shall we say, of partnerships available to us. Out of my own experience, both from past reviews as well as from the service received, I was more satisfied that from a value for money perspective, as well as a commercialism versus local government blended approach, the current, or the proposed rather, procurement service that we've discussed would actually deliver on those savings. A wider breadth of experience and a wider breadth of demonstrable evidence in terms of savings. Now, transitioning on to your question about residual savings, or sorry, anticipated savings moving forward. There are two types of savings that can actually be realized. One are what we call cashable savings, which means we buy a kilo of apples last year, we buy another kilo of apples this year, and we can measure a difference in the price of those, and we've saved some money. We've bought the same thing again, and there's a lower price. There is also an element called cost avoidance, which says within a procurement plan, we might have a contract coming up that costs us, say, £100,000 a year. But we can transform that particular service through the procurement process, asking suppliers for value-add contributions to their submission to make sure that we understand how they can improve the service and perhaps change it, at which point we wind up spending £80,000. So there would be a £20,000 spend of cost avoidance. And likewise, from quotations from the marketplace, if we have a benchmark quote which gives us £50,000 and we can bring in that procurement exercise at less than that, that's cost avoidance. So it's money that hasn't left the council from that perspective. Is there an anticipated level? It's really driven by the procurement plan and how much procurement we actually plan to do within a given year. There will be times when windfalls will happen, i.e. we might anticipate spending quite a lot of money on a software contract and find an alternative solution. There may be elements in the procurement plan that don't actually deliver a tremendous amount of savings. But from that perspective, I think the most important element within this is to make sure that you have the professionalism on board to go ahead and deliver those potential savings should they be there.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. My question actually was also in the memorandum of understanding. Now it's been partially answered, but I do want to revisit it slightly. Considering that we're looking for a service level agreement at the end of January, and the service level agreement does actually look robust, and we know that Nottingham City Council have experience in this, do we really need to explore interim arrangements? The reason I ask is because, a memorandum of understanding, okay, it maps out the intent, I suppose, but it doesn't have this kind of legal safeguards that a formal service level agreement has. And therefore, would it not be simpler just to say, we'll just go for the service level agreement? Because I'm thinking of, it's fine if everything's fine. It's when things go wrong that you want the kind of contractual framework to be in place, like, non-delivery of service or accidental overcharging. It's easier if there's a formal contractual arrangement. So do we need this interim arrangement? Do we need to have a memorandum of understanding?
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Yes, you're quite right. It would be better and safer to go straight into a service level. The one thing that I don't want to do, and this is, I must admit, this is a little bit of me trying to look around corners at this point, is if there is an issue with governance and signing up to that, I want to have some guiding principles agreed by both sides that actually then allow us to move forward in parallel, if you like. I don't want to face delays, if you like, and not have those have some level of governance, even if it's even in principle, only in principle, to go ahead and guide that. So every endeavor will be to, and given the fact that we have an SLA and it is robust, every effort will be made to go ahead and have that approved as soon as possible. But if there is a delay for whatever reason, there is another route for us to go ahead and, if you like, control or guide that process forward.
In my language, is that a little bit like belt and braces then?
Yes, Councillor Seaton. That's a good analogy.
I understand it now. Councillor Parton.
Justin, may I ask, what's the evidence base when we say the resources the council will require in the future will far outweigh the current team's capacity? What are we? What would we, if someone was looking at this, an auditor? How would we say that could be justified?
Well, thank you, Councillor Parton. The very simple answer in the first instance is that we have major contracts with Capita, ID Verde, and Serco, which will be up for review in the not too distant future from that perspective. Those three major multi-million-pound contracts would require a significant amount of resource. Now, there is an argument to say that we could always contract that in from outside. But based on the balance between establishment savings that we can deliver in the first instance, which aren't great, but they still contribute to the overall target, and the level of resource that we can actually contract via City because of their very broad team, very broad levels of experience, it would be impossible to hire that level of skill in a single individual. So from that perspective, we do have some pinch points in our procurement plan moving forward in several years, but we also have a need to deliver a significant savings on a significant shortfall, obviously in the MPFS, which we've discussed at length in several meetings. So from that perspective, procurement is going to be instrumental in helping to deliver a lot of those savings. I don't see how with an interim procurement manager and a senior procurement officer, we would have enough resource to go ahead and adequately support the organization to challenge in those procurement exercises and enter into a lot of the negotiations that will follow as a consequence.
And I've been told that I'm talking very loudly, so is that better? Right, so does this, you'll have to forgive my ignorance, apologies, does this extend to purchasing equipment? The reason I give an example that in our ward, Southfields, I once asked for a set of football goalposts and was told by an unnamed officer, oh, that will take so long. And I thought, to purchase a pair of goalposts. So does this extend through to the purchasing of equipment, or are we simply talking about large contracts?
Councillor Parton, it does actually proceed through to the purchase of equipment. This covers any procurement, I suppose, where any delineation might be made. It is around the level of spend that you're actually looking at, whether it's goods or services from that perspective. Part and parcel with this change in the procurement service will be alterations to our contract procedure rules, both in terms of the governance process surrounding those and the accountability, i.e. making sure that we have the appropriate records in place, but also revamping the system of waivers that we currently have in our contract procedure rules. And in effect, if you like, simplifying and reducing the amount of instances where that can actually be done. Giving officers within Charnwood the tools that they need to understand clearly, if I'm going to buy goalposts, of course I can buy goalposts, that's not a problem. But it's a case of, do I have 3 quotes? Have I given appropriate spec to get those quotes? And can I make a fair and unbiased judgment on value for money by purchasing those goalposts? So you certainly shouldn't hear, oh no, we can't buy goalposts. But it's really a case of which process do I have to follow for purchasing whichever item it may be.
Mm. And the final question is I have actually read an extremely good book called Negotiating as If Your Life Depends on It. And the question is looking through this draft service agreement, how happy are you with it? How much negotiation is still to be conducted? Is what in here are you thinking you know that we can't agree to that? We'll have to talk about that.
Well, I must admit, Councillor Parton, I'm a little bit biased simply because I negotiated the opposite side of that whilst at another authority. So I already know the contents, and from a legal perspective, I understand where ourselves as the purchasing authority are protected and where Nottingham City as the supplier is protected. And it is a very fair and balanced service level agreement. There's no onerous conclusion. And that was quite purposeful when we actually set that service level agreement out and negotiated between City and ourselves, because we tried to keep the premise of this is a mutual benefit scenario. So by buying the service, we help support their establishment. They maintain their officers who then deliver their service to us. So it becomes more of a virtuous circle. Now, if for whatever reason that service does not deliver and it cannot be measured against the KPIs that are listed in that service level agreement, then of course we have the right to terminate, and we can do that without prejudice in a fairly short time period, without any acrimony from that perspective. And that was very intentional from the first instance in setting up that contract. I'm very satisfied with that. Of course, we'll have our own legal services review that. If they have any elements that they would like to amend or bolster within that, we can go ahead and consider doing that. From a standing start, I have every confidence it's quite a strong document.
Thank you. I still have some questions. I take it there is in this agreement there are 5 councils: Charnwood, Mansfield, Bassetlaw, Nottingham and Ashfield. Have I got that right, or are we just in bed with Nottingham?
Councillor Seaton, Nottingham is the service provider, and the other councils are service recipients or purchasers, if you like. So
okay.
They're receiving the service like us.
So my second question would be, because Nottingham, obviously, it's a retrospect question that can't really be done anything now, but Nottingham is obviously offering this to make Nottingham a profit. So why didn't we do it? In view of commercialisation.
Certainly, Councillor Seaton, I understand that. I think from that perspective, we have to understand establishment costs. So from that perspective, they have a very large procurement team and they have a very large set of establishment costs. So the benefit to Nottingham City in this is not necessarily a profit. It is a contribution towards their cost base because they have additional capacity that they can sell in effect. So their general fund revenue account has to pay for less of that. Whereas we don't have that same level of resource. So we would have to scale up our resource, increase our establishment costs, and then try to win the work in and develop the service as well. So from a pure timing perspective, this balance works. And not only that, we don't have the level of critical mass in our spend to deliver the economies of scale that we want to in purchasing. So whereas Nottingham City, as being a unitary, they'll do everything that we do as well as everything the county would do. From that perspective, they are already buying a significant level of the resources that we would be asking them to procure for us on our behalf, which means we can leverage our spending power with their spending power to achieve better pricing in the market than we could do on our own from that perspective. So even if we were Charnwood and we were starting out with creating a service and bringing all the other districts on board, we would have to bring about 10 districts on board just to have the same spending power in our categories that Nottingham City already has, just because of its kind of critical mass.
Okay, but can I have confidence that these sort of things are being sought from the commercialisation view? These avenues of being able to offer services to other councils. I know I'm going off track here, But obviously that's what the panel suggested, that was done on commercialisation, that we go forward with offering services to other councils. And that is also a question that you don't have to answer. But obviously it's there now. There's just one question, and I don't know who will answer this one. And it's in the risk management that you have got there. The Charnwood Borough Council employees do not fully engage with the new services. And I'm a bit curious to say, why is that moderate there? Why is it not very low rather than moderate?
Thank you, Councillor. So to answer your first question, given the fact that we're still developing proposals, we are looking at sharing other services with other councils. That is under current investigation. I don't know how much more to discuss at this point, probably not a lot, but trust me, that is actually being looked at, with Charnwood taking the lead from that perspective. On the second bit, with regards to engagement, the risk is moderate based on experience, given that it was previously externally delivered, and then we changed supplier to another external provider, Nottingham City at Ashfield. And from that perspective, we did initially have some difficulty with getting people to engage with not only a new service, but also new ways of working, new contract procedure rules. And it really was a case of sponsoring that uptake through the process, helping a lot of fellow officers through that process and navigate the differences and what actually needs to happen, and showing them what good looks like on many occasions. And that's not to be underestimated. I would hope that there wasn't an overestimation of the risk in that. And if anything, we're recognizing the fact that it can be difficult, because we're talking about human beings, and human beings aren't easy on the best day. So from that perspective, we have to recognize that there's a risk, and we have to manage that risk moving forward, which is why it's moderate, not low.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Brooks.
Hello. Thank you, Justin. I've got it's a kind of two-pronged question. So the first part of it is there a minimum term to the service level agreement? But that kind of follows on to the second point of the question that Councillor Parton kind of and yourself alluded to earlier, that if it isn't working for us, you said there's a short amount of time for us to be able to get out of that agreement. Just wondered what the amount of time that was.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. The minimum term, well, the term within the service level agreement is 3 years. Now, previously, under EU regulations, if we were to go beyond 3 years with this agreement, we'd be bumping up against EU thresholds, and it'd be a violation of procurement regulations. Now, how that will change moving forward, we're not quite clear on yet, but we're going to set it initially at a 3-year term. With regards to, and that could be terminated, to your second point, with 12 months notice from that perspective. So that would give us safety in knowing that we recovered from that service over time for a transition, but likewise, we're not bound to an entire 3-year agreement, and we're not required to determine the contract or pay the remainder to the rest of the contract if we were to.
Okay. Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manson.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Just one thing I'm looking at here, like Brenda did as well, with regarding the actual employees. Are we going to have a satellite office here in conjunction with Nottingham, or is it going to have somebody actually on the ball here to make sure they're doing the job for us, watching our backs type of thing? Am I right in thinking that that is right?
Yes, Councillor Ranson, you are correct in that instance. So there are two elements with that. First of all, our senior procurement officer will remain in post, and for exactly that reason, in that we have that internal liaison who's keeping their eye on the ball internally and is there for officers on a day in, day out basis. Certainly in terms of the way that the service is delivered, at least initially in the beginning days, pre-COVID, we would have had officers on site 2 or 3 days a week. Typically, you start that out on a clinic basis. So you'll say every Tuesday from 8 until noon, for example, or every Tuesday, Thursday until noon. However, that will soon move into the needs of the service. So whenever the meetings are that they're required to attend, or whenever they feel like they need to have a face-to-face, certainly with this service, I've noticed Nottingham City officers are very proactive. Funnily enough, the lead officer that's proposed to actually look after Charnwood lives in Loughborough. So from that perspective, she's on our doorstep. I have a good working relationship with her. She's delivered quite a lot of good stuff for Ashfield on my watch. And from that perspective, she'll be looking after us moving forward. So,
in
yes,
actual fact,
there will be people that have our back. Yes.
Yeah, yes, I can see that. And the actual 3 years contract will be reviewed after 3 years. Am I correct in thinking as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. And in the meantime, that we've got a get out clause if we feel that they're not producing the way you want them to produce. Yes.
Yes, Councillor. That's correct.
Yeah,
yes.
That's okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I've got no more blue hands up. Councillor Barclay, is there anything you would like to add to this? I think we've talked about it, given it a good airing.
Yeah, I think councillors have really focused on the critical points, and I think the answers have been back really show the benefits to us, and it's something that's been worked at other councils, and I don't think you could scrutinise it anymore. I think you've asked all the relevant questions. I've not really got anything to add.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan? No? That's all right then. Right, so the recommendation that we've got is that the authority be delegated to the Strategic Director, Commercial Development, to negotiate, agree and enter. Sorry, Karen, were you saying something?
No.
No, oh, there you go. I'm expecting someone to stop me in full flow. Negotiate, agree and enter into a service level agreement with representatives of Nottingham City Council for the provision of procurement services to Charnwood Borough Council in line with the details provided in the report that we've just scrutinised. So I would like to go through the committee and ask whether they support the recommendation. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Hello, yeah, I support the recommendation as well, thank you.
Councillor Hodge-Nicolau.
I support the recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I support the recommendation.
Councillor Parton.
Chair, I support the recommendation.
Councillor Ranson.
Chair, I support the recommendation.
And I support the recommendation also. Thank you very much. Right, now we're going on to, oh, I don't know whether I've just gone on too far now, I have. 9B, which is commercialisation position statement. Councillor Morgan, would you like to introduce this report, please?
I will do, Chair. Thank you very much for letting me do so. This was picking up from pretty well the last paper that came to the last physical cabinet that was held back in March, which feels a long time ago. But it's really continuing our discussion about commercialisation of what we actually do, the way that we actually manage things, and also services. And this position statement, it's very rare that we have position statements going through cabinet, but this position statement sets out some of the sort of basic principles of how we as an organization will tackle commercialization in what we do. And commercialization, I think, is probably almost be better off thinking of it as a frame of mind, a mindset, rather than necessarily a physical task. Because I think it's important that as an organization, we actually think about the services that we provide for our residents, but also how we actually provide them in a much more commercial way. And certainly when we go about our lives, that's precisely what we're doing. And as an organisation, I think it's probably good practice that we reflect our residents and their behaviour in what we actually do as well. So there are three main areas sort of defined as commercialisation. One is generating a surplus and reducing subsidy. Obviously, that's precisely what we need to do as an organisation, given the tough times that we've been through over the last 6 months. Commissioning, in other words, some of the things that you've just been discussing in the last paper, and behaving commercially, and that's the mindset element that I flagged at the beginning. So the paper or the position statement sets out some of those principles and also ties in with some of the further papers that will be coming, People Strategy being one in the new year, that will hope to embed some of this thinking into a sort of wider framework of things that the council does, and also how our staff behave within the organisation. It's really welcome. I know there was a good scrutiny panel on commercialisation, which presented to Cabinet a month or two back, and I know Justin has talked to Paul Baines, who led that, Councillor Baines, who led that commercialisation panel, to make sure that this position statement embedded not only the thoughts of scrutiny and Cabinet, but also the scrutiny panel as well. So really quite an interesting process for this council to go through. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Justin Henry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Chair. Not quite a lot to add. Again, very good introduction. Thank you, Leader. From that perspective, it really is a frame of mind. And having stood at the coalface of commercialism when it's been started from a standing start in terms of taking a definition or a perception of what commercialism was previously and then having to mold that. The position statement is quite important in terms of getting those principles in. And as the Leader has said, it really is about a frame of mind, and it's a way of behaving. It's probably important that we recognize that a lot of the initiatives that we're already implementing within the council and within officers as SLT or as a senior leadership team are really commercial attributes, whether it's our people strategy, developing behaviors and competencies, developing leadership skills, good decision making, financial analysis, et cetera, et cetera. These are all things that help us drive and evolve as an organization. And they are all commercial. To wrap them up and call them commercialism, I suppose is convenient, but it really does pervade every aspect. The other element to add to this on this position statement, and you'll note this towards the end, is effectively just because something sounds like it might be a good idea doesn't necessarily mean that we should always do it. And there's a set of criteria that we need to evaluate every opportunity against. And likewise, within that, we need to make sure that we're doing it for the right level of benefit and that we don't have a misalignment, if you like, of effort and reward from these perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Right, thank you, Chair. If this is not an appropriate question at this point, then please tell me. But my question is, realistically, how much commercial income do we need to generate year on year so that we, put ourselves into a much more favourable financial position than we currently are in? Thank you.
I'll probably ask Justin to actually answer that in a lot more detail, but I think that to really be very clear, this is different to the commercial property strategy, which is about earning income. This is a different thing, but I'll pass over to Justin, who will probably go over that a little bit more detail.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Bolton. In terms of how much income we need to deliver year on year, I suppose the question is already answered, but it's not going to be purely commercial income that delivers that. So from that perspective, we know what our shortfall in the general fund revenue account is in the MTFS. We know the size of the challenge that we're actually facing. Any good commercial organization will always try to blend both approaches, whether it's generating income or reducing costs, to go ahead and achieve any kind of shortfall that they may have. From that perspective. The balance of that, whether it's 50-50, 60-40, that can change on a daily basis, can change on a weekly basis if we have a windfall or if we have a run of quote unquote bad luck. But nevertheless, we need to be focused on it, measuring it, and making sure that we're reporting on it and trying to deliver that regularly, maybe daily. I might defer to the chief executive. I think you might have an additional element to go ahead and add to that.
I think you've probably covered it actually, Justin, but just to add a little bit, we obviously need to develop a significant amount of commercial income, you know, in the hundreds of thousands of pounds in order to really start to contribute to that budget shortfall that we have. But as Justin's already said, that on its own will not be enough to deal with the MTFS issue that we have, and we will need to look at efficiencies and savings to help deliver the overall MTFS. I suspect that as we go through the budget process for next year and then looking down the revised MTFS, we might be able to give a little bit more flesh on the bones, Councillor Bolton, to the sort of numbers that we're aiming for. Whilst we go through the process at the moment, though, I think it's fair to say it will have to be a blend, but the proportions of which we don't exactly know at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parton.
On areas of focus on page 69, it does say on point 5, investment, the council will in parallel look to invest capital in regeneration and commercial opportunities. Splitting that question into two, with a university town and then a series of small towns and villages, how much private investor partnerships can you realistically see the council entering into? And secondly, presumably this strategy incorporates the possible selling of some of our assets that we no longer need. I'm thinking of things like, it has been mentioned about Southfields building, Limehurst Depot.
Thank you, Councillor Parton. So to answer your first element, with the private, if you like, private-public partnerships or an investment opportunity internally, those can exist on any particular point. As a council, we have the statutory ability to invest our money, and certainly we have an imperative from a regeneration perspective. And there's no reason that regeneration can't be commercial, whereas the council can potentially take a stake. A perfect example of that is the town deal. So whereas we're looking for external capital, an element of which will be considered seed capital or seed money to help deliver otherwise unprofitable projects. And certainly we now have access to the expertise that we need to go ahead and deliver those. And it's important to remember that any of these elements will always have a robust business case behind it that's auditable, that can be understood, that's defendable, that's statutorily compliant. So from that perspective, it's certainly not a shoot from the hip scenario. In terms of selling assets, in principle, that will be considered, but it's not necessarily yet determined. And again, there needs to be a business case. Are the assets that we're going to sell, what is the alternative? Will it impact on our ability to deliver services? Will it make us less effective? So all of these elements are going to take consideration. And it's not just as easy as saying there's something that is surplus to requirement and we're going to sell it for as much money as we can get it. We need to ensure, both from a best value perspective, as well as kind of a moral imperative perspective, that releasing that asset is not going to work to the detriment of our ability to deliver services to residents. So again, there will be a business case, there will be financial modeling, quite a lot of due diligence, and we'll make sure that we understand what we're happy. I think the underlying point with both of those is all elements will be considered before a decision is made, and every decision that is made will be justifiable.
And in terms of a strategy where we seek to make money, it does say on page 67, it gives examples of local authorities that have made investments and failed, meaning that out of every 10 business ventures started, only 4 will last more than 5 years. So I appreciate you did say, Justin, that a robust business case obviously is considered before any investment, but it can't be guaranteed that they'll succeed. And so to that end, what I would suggest and what I'd like to put forward is that we have, apart from the external auditors, what is there? Who would be making an objective judgment on our commercialisation strategy? Because obviously CBC themselves will always want to for reputation to say that it worked. Who would be providing the checks and balances from an external point of view to ensure that given that meaning out of 10 businesses ventures started, only 4 will last more than 5 years, and we've seen the destructive effects of this pandemic. What checks and balances externally can we implement?
Thank you, Councillor Parton. In terms of checks and balances, there are 2 elements to recognise. The first one is there is a level of challenge that is present within the council because of statutory obligations that we have to do an appropriate level of risk mitigation and risk analysis on anything that we do. So you may have heard of the Treasury Green Book, which defines how we need to lay out business cases and what they need to address in order to go ahead and do things that can be defended. And there will be a level of challenges between officers, whereas we might have some officers that are more risk aware and some that are more risk averse. But in terms of openness and communication, as long as all of those ideas are being tabled and they're being effectively challenged and addressed, that will help develop that. From an external perspective, where we don't have the expertise and the ability to go ahead and determine something, we will seek the advice of outside legal experts, outside financial experts, whether it's our treasury management advisors, whether it's external law firms, to go ahead and understand if what we're doing is actually in the spirit and the name of the law from that perspective, and actually works from a financial perspective. The entire commercial game is all about risk management. It's always about risk management. It's about knowing how to look around corners. I talk a lot about being able to see around corners, but it's about anticipation. And if something goes wrong, what do we do then? And having a clear course to go ahead and do that. Certainly from a senior management perspective, there is every desire to go ahead and make that work in a prudent fashion, certainly in a risk-aware fashion, which means we understand nothing is for free, nothing's a given, but we will go ahead and do everything that we can with all the available information we can at any point in time to make the right decision from that perspective. And of course, those decisions will run through the standard governance process anyway. They'll be available for scrutiny. They'll be available for members to go ahead and feed in on once the analysis is deemed to be complete. So there won't be any de facto decisions that aren't actually understood, analyzed, or discussed.
And finally, there's been some chat. I apologise to the Chief Executive because I couldn't hear his answer. So you probably said something, Rob, but unfortunately I couldn't understand. I couldn't hear it. I would have understood it, but I couldn't hear it. But so finally, what level of private investor are you seeing? I'll give you a quick example. Ironically enough, for the Chief Executive and you, Justin, I was actually in Ashfield yesterday, seeing the new Amazon factory and various industrial estates, and I was quite taken. I thought there's a lot of investment around here, so well done to you both for that. But in terms of looking at Loughborough and Charnwood, what realistically do you think we can achieve? What do you see? Do you think we can get to the levels of of driving down the A38 in Ashfield and seeing multiple sites come up.
Would you like me to pick that one up, Chair? Is that, yeah? So, well, I'm glad you've been having a trip up to Ashfield, and I'm glad it was still looking promising up there in terms of the amounts of development. It's a slightly different area in terms of the development prospects and opportunities. I happen to think Loughborough and Charnwood has a range of different sites and attributes that are really quite promising. And I think the opportunities around the two enterprise zones are areas that we really do need to focus on, because not only will they potentially see quite a bit of development, but they'll also create quite a lot of value added for our local economy, quite a lot of jobs and high earning jobs. I'm hoping you can hear me, Councillor Parson. I can see you leaning forward there, so hopefully I'm loud enough.
You are very quiet.
Am I? I have turned up the microphone as far as it can go, so my apologies for that. I'll speak quite loudly. So the point there, I think, really is that there are lots of opportunities for Charnwood in terms of development. We've got the enterprise zones, we've got various sites within the current and future local plan, and there is a good engagement in local developers. There are some areas I think that we could perhaps build on that relationship a bit further, but overall I think our opportunities are quite good. Even with the pandemic, there are opportunities for us to engage with the private sector, and really that's where some of our work with the town deal can help lever some of that into the town centre, particularly, which I think is going to have to be an area of focus given the impact of the pandemic. So hopefully that's answered your question, Councillor Parton. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barclay, is there anything you'd like to add to this discussion?
No, I think, thank you, Chair. We've got a level of expertise which we've not had before. I think one of the benefits of having a commercial strategic director who has extensive experience in the area of investment in terms of commercialisation is a real benefit to the council. I think there's no guarantees in any commercial venture, no matter what it is. And particularly we've seen in the pandemic how things change very, very quickly. But we are really set on a course to try and help ourselves as much as we can to maintain services to residents, and all is not lost. If we took no action, we would be in a deficit position in 3 years' time. But there is every opportunity for us to correct that with appropriate action, not reckless, not just jumping at the first opportunity that comes along, but by actually looking, analysing and working. But we do have to move at pace. There is no way councillors can have acquired the same commercial acumen as our commercial director over many years, and it's not, whereas I think councillors can very, very well understand what's going on without any difficulty. They perhaps haven't got the skills that he's got in that direction, but there's no reason why councillors shouldn't understand it, and I would want them to understand it and appreciate what we're trying to do, and that's all I've got to add.
Right, Councillor Morgan.
Oh, I forgot to unmute myself. That's £5 to the chair. So just to really sort of sum up, just to really sort of reiterate, this is a position statement rather than necessarily a full-blown strategy. There are a whole series of elements that will be tied in that make up the sort of disparate parts of this position statement. The commercial investment strategy is one element, the people strategy is another, etc. But the three core elements of this position statement, again, going back to those, one is about generating surplus and reducing subsidy, and Councillor Barclay has just touched on those, and a couple of the questions reference that. Commissioning, which again is the previous paper, which has been started to be looked at, but also the most important one, again, this will come back to the people strategy to follow, which is actually behaving commercially as an organisation, both from an officer viewpoint, but also to our residents and the businesses that we support. And I think it's really important to actually remember that there's three elements to this, not just one. And those three elements together will set us apart from other organisations and other councils in the area, because I don't think there are many around, to be frank, that will actually cover all three areas successfully as we intend to do. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. And it's quite tempting to think that the commercial investment strategy was born out of how we see ourselves now with the pandemic and with our back against the wall, as it may seem. But obviously this was born more than a couple of years ago. So it's you know, it's well down the line, and you might think, well, it's a shame we didn't do it earlier, but we did do it earlier. We did do it before the pandemic. So thank you very much. So the recommendation would be that the Cabinet, the recommendation is that the Cabinet note and improve the commercialisation position statement. And I'm assuming that I've got to get your agreement as well as the Commission, and I'm starting to, I don't have to look at my prompt anymore. So it's Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I support the recommendation.
Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, I support that too. Thank you.
Councillor Harji-Nicolau.
I support the recommendation, Chair.
Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I support the recommendation.
Councillor Parton.
You have support, Chair, for the recommendation.
Councillor Ransom.
I support the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that is it. The recommendation is fully supported. So I'm going to item 10, which is, item 10, the pre-decision scrutiny Cabinet responses. Karen, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is to report and is to note the responses made to recommendations submitted by the Commission at the last meeting. I've just spotted a typo, in fact, in the section in the report there where it says pre-decision scrutiny. Since the meeting of the Scrutiny Commission on, and it says the 6th of July, it is actually the 14th of September. So if that could be picked up in the minutes. And as I say, this is literally a report for noting the responses made by Cabinet to those three items listed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So, are there any questions on that, please? No? Has anybody, sorry, I don't know whether the Councillor Morgan, Chief Exec, and Justin Henry would like to go now while we carry on. And Councillor Barclay, I'll let you go as well if you want. Thank you for coming. Right, so now I've got to check whether members of the committee require any additional information or clarification. We've gone past that. And whether any items have been identified for future agendas from the key decision notices started on page 81 of the agenda. We have, Karen has noted some. We've got something from Councillor Parton as well. So Karen, can you have the floor, please?
Right, thank you, Chair. So I've picked up a couple of things that I'm going to suggest that need to be added to the work programme. So if I go through those, so the first one that needs adding to the work programme is at the recent Scrutiny Audit Chairman's meeting that Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Seaton attended. There was an action for an inclusion of an item to review retrospectively the first two commercial property purchases and looking at the due diligence that has taken place, the criteria for assessing suitability of opportunities and processes. And so I was going to say that needs to be added to the November meeting. I'm going to go through each of these items individually. So would members be okay if we added that item to the work programme for November? Yeah, I've got for clarity on for YouTube. Yes, that's been agreed by the members. The next item that I'm suggesting needs to be added to the work programme. I have reviewed each of the scrutiny work programmes And I've noted that the Housing Planning, Regeneration and Regulatory Services Scrutiny Committee has on its work programme that at each of its meetings it receives an update on the quarterly figures for the 5-year housing land supply, irrespective of whether it drops below 5.5 years. I felt that was quite an important item, and possibly that the Scrutiny Commission may wish to add it to its work programme. Would you be in agreement with that?
Everybody nodding?
Nods. Yeah, I can see everyone's nodding. So for the record,
Councillor Hodge-Nicolau, can you nod? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It just saves on doing a roll call each time, so we'll add that to the work programme. I also noticed that on the Neighbourhoods and Community Wellbeing Work Programme, every 6 months it receives an update on and a review of the Community Safety Partnership. Now this is a legal requirement and so needs to be added to the work programme. So I'm going to suggest that that is added to the work programme along with the fact that we have a recovery cell update for the community in November. If you would be in agreement to having the community cell update in November, which would then, it would be the same officers giving the 6-monthly update on the Community Safety Partnership as well, the crime and disorder and that as well. So I think that would make sense. So November, good. Just take that one off. The next item I've picked up is we need a recovery cell update on the economic recovery cell for December. Is everybody in agreement with that? Yeah.
The organisational cell no longer exists. So
yes, that's right. Good point. The other thing I've looked at when I've gone through the work programme, on page 78, there's the draft annual scrutiny report, which normally goes in April, and it was put back because of the pandemic. And again, I'm going to suggest that this is actually postponed, and we have a very comprehensive report in April next year. So it will effectively be this year and the year before. So it'd be quite a long report, but I just think it will bring it all together. Are you in agreement with that?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. And for the record, that's all been agreed to as well. And then the other thing that I wish to highlight is an additional cabinet meeting has been set up for the 7th of January 2021, and that is to consider the Charnwood local plan pre-submission. It goes on to recommendation to council on the 18th of January, and I suggest that that is added to the work programme, but I do need to get a little bit more information from the planning service. So if I put that as a item provisionally to be added to the work programme, and then you can agree at the next meeting.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would say is if you do decide to have that, you would need to have an additional meeting of the Scrutiny Commission. So at the moment they've got the additional cabinet, one item only, 7th of January, which would mean that that's on a Thursday. So the Scrutiny Commission would need to be on the Monday, the 4th of January.
Is anybody going away for Christmas and New Year? No?
No. So so on that basis, I'll find out a little bit more information from the planning service and see, but it looks like we have got an agreement there to have an additional meeting on the 4th of January, and I'll put that on the work programme as well.
And the suggestion of sorry, go on then.
I can't remember now, and I was on a flow, and then so that's the work programme, and then I've been looking at the key decisions, and you're right, Councillor Ted Parton suggested that we had pre-decision scrutiny of the discretionary private sector housing licensing scheme. That's going to Cabinet on the 10th of December, so we'd come to the December meeting.
Yeah.
We're in agreement with that. Looking through the key decisions list, are there any other ones that you'd like bringing forward for pre-scrutiny? Things I thought of: Shepshed Town Centre Public Room Improvement Project. Would you like that pre-scrutinising?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, Councillor Parton's got his hand up. Do you want? Shall we just?
Yeah, Councillor Parton.
Yeah, hands up. How much trouble would it be for Democratic Services to send that 1 week reminder? SMB is on Scrutiny Commission. Sorry, is on the 12th of October. This is what they're considering.
Yeah.
This. Send your comments in by Friday noon.
Yeah. What we will do, so as with any agenda publications, when we publish the Scrutiny Commission agenda, when we send out to all councillors, we'll send out a special email to all the members of the Scrutiny committees to say, please note that this item, these two items, this item, whatever it might be, has been added to the agenda. Please feed your comments into the chairs and vice chairs of the Scrutiny Commission and indeed all the other members. So we will, that is an extra process when we publish the Scrutiny Commission agenda in the future.
So for clarification then, if you are, one is a member of, say, Neighbourhood and Communities Scrutiny Committee, and you send some comments to that regarding the 6-month review you were talking about, and you send your comments to the chair of the Neighbourhood Community, it's dependent on him or her to send that to you and to the chair of this committee, or is it something that you chase them up on? Have you received anything?
When I've looked through the membership of the chairs and vice chairs of the Scrutiny committees, some of them are actually on the Scrutiny Commission, so by default they will actually filter through, and so it is the responsibility of the members getting their email, and I would suggest they copy in Democratic Services, so at least those comments get fed in at the meeting. I think, is that okay? Thank you. Then continuing where I left off, so Bedford Square Gateway project, that's going to Cabinet on the 19th of November. Would you like that to be pre-scrutinised?
How much? Bedford Square, that's in Loughborough?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's
and how many have we got on already?
We've just agreed the Shepshed Town Centre Public Improvement Project. And then the other item there is the Bedford Square one.
Haven't we got the housing licensing on that one as well?
That's December.
That's December, is it? Then yes, Bedford Square on the November one.
And the December, there I can see there's the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy going to Cabinet on the 10th of December. You will already have the item on licensing scheme proposals. So do you want to look at the equality strategy? I mean, it's entirely your decision. I'm just highlighting these as possible items.
Councillor Hamilton.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
It's the equality and it's not equality and diversity. It's the
it is.
Oh, it is that one. Sorry, the equality and diversity. Would you like that to come?
I think that's an important thing to kind of monitor. Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
So one, and then we've I don't know if we've already picked up the discretionary private sector housing as well for that meeting. So that's 2. Any other things that members, when they've looked through that list, they want adding to the work programme?
So at the end of your papers, on the very end, you've got a whole list there of forthcoming key decisions. So Karen's already read quite a few that we're going to discuss. If you find that you would like to discuss any more on there, please get in touch with Karen, but please CC myself and Councillor Hamilton into it. That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, so that's good. So we've added quite a few items to the work programme and the list of pre-decision scrutinies there. I've got nothing else to add. Thank you.
And I must say thank you to you all. I think tonight's was a very good scrutiny commission. Lots of relevant questions were asked and lots of very involved answers were given. So thank you very much. It always makes a meeting go a little bit better, and it's very good for my understanding of things. So thank you very much. And the next meeting will be the 16th of November.